Welcome back, everyone. Next up, we have Avalon Advanced Materials Inc. It trades on the OTCQB under the symbol AVLNF and on the TSX under the symbol AVL, and is a Canadian mineral development company specializing in sustainably produced materials for clean technology. The company now has 4 advanced stage projects, providing investors with exposure to lithium, tin, and indium, as well as rare earth elements, tantalum, cesium, and zirconium. Please welcome its president, Zeeshan Syed. Welcome, Zeeshan.
Thank you, Anna. It's great to see you.
All right. We look forward to hearing your presentation, and call me back when you're ready for questions.
No problem at all. Thank you very much. So yeah, Avalon Advanced Materials, we've kind of revamped some of our work. I'm very happy to be here today. Obviously, some forward-looking statements. A lot of what we talk about today is with good intent and looking to the future. So a bit of background about Avalon. We're a Canadian mineral development company specializing in sustainably produced materials for the clean tech era that's now upon us. We've got 4 major projects focused on lithium, tin, indium, rare earth elements, tantalum, cesium, zirconium, quite a broad portfolio of assets, which I give a lot of credit to our CEO for establishing. But our main flagship asset is our Separation Rapids lithium project, which is based near Kenora in northwestern Ontario. Just a note on those yellow stars, Separation Rapids, as you can see, bottom left is where our mine is. The second yellow star there is Thunder Bay, which I'll talk about, our aspirations to establish our midstream processing facility there. And the third star for our folks in Toronto or others or elsewhere around the world is the city of Toronto, just for some context. So one of the key messages that I'd like to deliver today, both to our shareholders and to investors, our objectives for the year. We've got a very focused and methodic plan for the balance of this year. These are certainly, there's a lot of good activity underway. There's a lot that is going on, but just to give some context, some of the key objectives: we're seeking to formalize strategic partnerships to advance our lithium projects, supporting multiple sectors. And I'll get into a bit of that, why Avalon is a key differentiator in the marketplace. Our lithium asset can serve multiple sectors. We'll talk a bit about that. And we will pursue available government funding for midstream processing. The Canadian government, we'll talk more about that in detail, has really focused its financial support on recycling and midstream processing, which fits very much in line with Avalon's aspirations for the year. This year, we're seeking to grow our lithium resources via acquisitions and through exploration activities at Separation Rapids. We've got quite an exciting drill program in place right now. We're quite pleased with some of the preliminary data that's coming out there, and we'll have a mineral resource estimate update for the second half of 2023. We're also looking to expand our drilling program at adjacent properties, Snowbank, very exciting other property that we own, and Lily Pad as well. So all within this context of the Northwest Corridor of Ontario. As you all know, Ontario's been quite a hotbed of activity recently, and we look to support that with Avalon kind of moving in with its upstream and midstream activity. We also seek to commence our definitive feasibility study at Separation Rapids this year and finalize our acquisition of Thunder Bay property, which will be the home of Ontario's first lithium refinery. We're quite excited about that, and we'll talk about that in our upcoming slides. Very strategic location, which I'll get into. And finally, complete our test work for lithium concentrate conversion to hydroxide. One of the things that we know very well is the suitability of petalite, which is the form of lithium that we have, to produce lithium hydroxide. And quite exciting news we have coming. We've got some test work underway, which we will have some news on, which demonstrates the suitability both for the EV market and for that glass ceramic market. So just a note on the critical minerals value chain, there's a lot of talk, a lot of activity underway. But one of the main thesis that we've been advocating for is that this is not just a mining story. This is all about the innovation economy and all about advanced manufacturing. So that supply chain is quite robust. I give a lot of credit to our federal and provincial colleagues. They've rightfully identified the downstream as the initial focus and helping bring some of the big names to Canada and to Ontario, as we'll talk about. And building the supply chain really is all about applying innovation and designing appropriate extraction processes to meet the requirements of the end users. So demand supply dynamics, obviously the lithium market in particular has been a hotbed of activity. Total demand for lithium battery materials is forecasted to jump at least 50% this year. Demand for lithium is set to grow the fastest of any of the critical minerals that are out there. International Energy Agency in Paris, France, the World Bank, and quite a few other folks have talked about this multifold increase in demand. Lithium hydroxide prices have risen from $5,000 a ton in 2020 to over $70,000 as we've seen, but we expect a variability there and for that to kind of come down. Right now, analysts are telling us that the refineries in China are the only folks not making money. That's because there's been quite a bit of activity in unlocking that upstream supply. But one of the key differentiators and one of the key pivots for Avalon is to be first in market to establish that midstream lithium hydroxide capacity. Prices will normalize, will balance out, but there's tremendous opportunity. Of course, the more lithium upstream supply that's available, it's going to need a place to be refined. So that's where the Thunder Bay story is quite powerful, quite excited about that. The federal and provincial governments of Ontario, it's been all over the news. You've seen very recent news with Volkswagen selecting as its first investment outside of Europe, Ontario. So we're quite excited about that. The federal government of Canada and the Ontario government have really done a lot of tremendous work and really made the Made in Ontario strategy quite key, quite provocative. Our transportation sector in Ontario and that shift to that EV future is top of mind here. So we're helping support that. Avalon really is helping fill that gap and helping support establishing that midstream processing capacity to produce lithium battery materials. And we've got other aspirations as well at the local level in the community to invest in innovation, research and development with some of our university colleagues there. Lakehead University in Thunder Bay, for example, very quickly becoming a center of research and innovation. The federal government has really focused its fire, as I mentioned off the top, on helping support the establishment of the midstream capacity. And I think that's very important. The supply-demand economics really support that, and the geopolitics really support that. If we look today, there is no other place than China really to establish that lithium hydroxide capacity, which quite frankly is a competitive disadvantage for North American markets. So being first in the market, helping support lithium hydroxide capacity is really a key plank in our strategy as we go forward. We are in the process of modernizing our team. We've got quite an experienced team, Don Bubar, who many of the shareholders know very well, quite a visionary, I have to say, really saw this future from a long time ago. We've added a new VP of Operations and COO, who's really taken the reins to help build out our capacity on the ground. And we've got a fantastic board of directors with a very strong complement of skills. And we'll be looking to build that team as we move forward here. One of the areas where Avalon really has been a leader, quite frankly, in Canada, before when it was quite fashionable to talk about ESG, is really on sustainability. We published late last fall our 11th consecutive sustainability report, and we're really looking at the future here because traceability of supply really is becoming a hotbed now. A lot of focus there, looking at that entire value chain, looking at total value, looking at that GHG profile from top to bottom. We're looking at the IISB, the International Sustainability Standards Board, which really encompasses a lot of interesting other sub components, one of which is the Task Force for Climate Financial Disclosures, the TCFD. The SEC in the US has really started to advocate for a lot of the US listed companies, this kind of total value scenario. So that certainly Avalon is looking, as we were a leader back then, we're looking to modernize our work and making sure that our corporate objectives fit the sort of future of where ESG and sustainability fit and where we're headed as we get into production. One of the big goals that we achieved, one of the big check marks is Benchmark Minerals, very quickly becoming quite a reputable third-party advocate in the critical mineral space. We were benchmark approved last year. They're top tier of 3% within the lithium space, and they had quite a substantial 65 metrics, if I remember correctly, that they looked at for ranking that score. So we're very pleased by that. Our capital structure, a quick note there. We closed on private placement right before Christmas last year, just under $2 million, which we've deployed at Separation Rapids for that deep drilling program that I talked about. So our Separation Rapids lithium project, we've been primed for quite some time, and we're very pleased with some of the activity there. The big whopper is our primary lithium pegmatite discovery acquired back in 1997. We own that 100%. We've got fantastic transportation and energy infrastructure in the region, and we have a good relationship with the Wapsamong independent nations, the WIN. They have a chief there. We've been in direct dialogue there. We look to expand that dialogue. Very important right holders in that region. They've asked for a lot of information, which we intend to have a bit of a platform for dialogue as we move forward here. We look at our First Nations collaboration and those stakeholders very much an important part of what we're trying to build. And as part of our capital and equity structure of our ongoing work, we look to inspire them, quite frankly. There's a lot of lithium pegmatites in that region, and helping support their aspirations, helping them understand the tremendous economic development opportunities there. We stand to benefit from a lot of their learnings, their culture, their understanding of that region, and we're really looking forward to working with those colleagues in the region. More on Separation Rapids, really our M&I, of course, 8.4 million tons. As I mentioned off the top, we've got a deep drilling program there. The second half of this year, we're quite pleased, actually. We're quite excited about some of the results that are coming in, which will help demonstrate that primary lithium asset to be quite more substantial than what it is. And I mentioned off the top the role of petalite. Perhaps largely misunderstood, but it's a large LCT pegmatite, petalite, and lepidolite. Fantastic use, very low impurities. There's been a lot of talk and a lot of focus on spodumene, but we look at petalite as being a quite a dramatic substitute strategy for some of the downstream users, certainly as we look at the battery market. It's got fantastic applications in the glass and ceramics industry. That's over a $2 billion industry that we look to kind of move in as well. And I think really, frankly, as I move into my next slide here, a good segue, our two-pronged strategy. That's what really helps set Avalon apart. Right now, of course, a lot of talk, a lot of activity on the EV battery supply chain. But as a good hedge to our strategy, the use of petalite in the glass ceramics industry, that's really a revenue-generating opportunity for us that we're looking at. We're in talks with a lot of companies, both in Europe and in Japan. The traditional supply of petalite resource has come from Zimbabwe. Geopolitics around this are quite interesting. China's got quite a tremendous influence in Africa and in Zimbabwe. So we are the only source in the Western world, quite frankly, of petalite. So all of a sudden, with the developments in Zimbabwe, closing that market off to the traditional demand and the users there, we're getting a lot of interest in that market for our petalite supplies. So that's part of our growth strategy that I mentioned off the top for 2023 is to organically expand that resource and that total volume of lithium asset that we have. So the petalite application for the glass ceramics industry represent no doubt a near-term cash flow opportunity for Avalon as early as 2025. And of course, petalite and lepidolite, both forms of concentrate, are perfectly suited for the battery grade lithium hydroxide that we need for that battery sector. So again, a fantastic and very powerful key differentiator of Avalon in the marketplace. Northwest Ontario hosts tremendous amounts of lithium pegmatites. And as we move forward here, the balance of 2023, we look to strengthen our portfolio in that space. So one of the key planks for us as part of our 2023 objectives is helping establish that lithium processing facility, which I mentioned off the top. We seek to establish North America's first vertically integrated lithium processing facility in Thunder Bay, Ontario. The project, in our estimation, will help bridge a current gap in the supply chain with midstream processing. A lot of activity, as I mentioned, in the upstream right now, trying to unlock raw material supply. But 2 to 3 years from now, the entirety of the focus will come on establishing non-China, quite frankly, aspects and opportunities for lithium hydroxide. Avalon has a decided interest to help be that first mover in the market and help identify and establish that midstream capacity and really help amplify Canada's critical mineral investments. They put a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of policy and financial power behind attracting that downstream supply. You can imagine what Volkswagen, LG, Ford, GM, some of the big names that are here in Canada are now asking for. It's that raw material supply. So building that national and North American supply chain is a preeminent policy and objective that we help support. And our vision is to help create a geostrategic facility, not just potentially for Avalon's petalite concentrate, but also others in the region. There are other companies also that are actively involved in creating that supply. So being that regional facility and being in a position to accept petalite concentrate is very important for us, and helping establish Canada as that critical minerals hub. As I mentioned, Ontario's made some fantastic strides in that regard, and we're helping to facilitate that further. And we aim to create an ESG leading, best-in-class project with process design that produces minimal waste. Petalite is a fantastic feedstock, as I mentioned, very low in its impurity, and a net zero carbon footprint. So we're very much the thought of that evokes when you think of a refinery, very traditional, conventional refinery, but we're very much rooted into that future design, using everything from AI to the latest technology. We're very excited about talking with our partners in that design process. So, the bridge to the electric mobility era, that's kind of where we're looking at, connecting the north to the south. You've heard Premier Ford here in Ontario really talk about that, is unlocking the mineral resources in the north of Ontario and helping connect to that manufacturing strength we have in the south. So our lithium process facility will help Canada advance its 2030 emissions reduction plan by providing that security of supply of lithium battery materials, infuse large-scale foreign direct investment into that Canadian clean energy sector. LG Energy Solution is one that's been very public. We signed an MOU back in 2022 with them. We're deep in discussions there. very complex, as you can imagine, but they are at the table. We're talking to them, and we've got another partner that we're talking to as well. So this trilateral partnership will certainly help amplify Canada's move and Ontario's move in helping our economic ties. And of course, delivering on our federal budget's call for midstream processing capacity. Again, we view this as the strategic pivot. A lot of attention on unlocking upstream supply, but that key pivot of midstream capacity really is going to help us achieve our GHG emission reduction plan and really help feed our downstream users that are now in Canada. I don't want to get too deep into the geopolitics. Of course, every morning I roll over and look at my Twitter, and it's full of news of very interesting geopolitical currents that are helping and in some respects not helping the sector, but helping strengthen Canada's US and EU, and quite frankly, Commonwealth relations as we help build these supply chains. That is very important as we go forward in this supply chain. And a final slide just to talk about our production timeline and our plan. What I'd like to say off the top here, this is rooted in very much a practical and quite frankly, a conservative timeline. We're getting very hopeful signs from our provincial governments when it comes to the permitting and regulatory process. As I mentioned in the objectives off the top, getting our definitive feasibility for Separation Rapids, that is very much a preeminent objective for us. We're very hopeful to get that going this year. The baseline study, permitting, environmental, and all the government approval that we need. Again, we're getting a lot of hopeful signs. The government certainly understands there's a bit of a mismatch there between the ambitions that we all have and some of the permitting issues that are there. Establishing a very modern, lean regulatory system that understands this new growing sector is paramount. So a practical timeline there. If that's shortened, that's fantastic. And we're certainly getting those signs. The engineering, procurement, construction, commissioning of our process facility at Separation Rapids, we're very hopeful to get that underway and, again, shorten some of those timelines. Getting petalite and lepidolite concentrates produced, we're very hopeful the back end of 2025, which again represents tremendous near-term cash flow opportunities for Avalon. There's a massive market out there for petalite and lepidolite con, so we're very keen there. And of course, on the refinery side, two distinct projects, getting our definitive feasibility study done and started, I should say, and then completed for the lithium hydroxide refinery. We want to get that started the second half of this year. The baseline studies, permitting, environmental, and government approval, again, a very strategic point, the refining capacity in North America. Outside of China, it is zero. They know that well. There's a gap in that supply chain and policy kind of framework right now. I've been in discussions with some federal colleagues who certainly understand that. President Biden in the United States, they certainly understand that. So the prospect of really helping expedite the build of that midstream capacity, that is top of mind. And that's where Avalon really has a powerful seat at the table. We're helping shape that thinking, that design. And of course, as we get out in acquisition of that Thunder Bay property and helping move that piece, quite frankly, our thesis is that is the key strategic pivot in this entire supply chain. If we can help establish that midstream capacity, we ultimately help appreciate and value a lot of the upstream assets that are there. And we put a big smile on the face of a lot of the downstream users that are looking for lithium hydroxide. So that's really what occupies a lot of my time in the day. Everything to do with engineering, procurement, permitting of that lithium hydroxide facility. We're hopeful to get that underway as soon as we can and get into production here, hopefully the back end of 2027. If the permitting and the environmental permitting, certainly if that can be expedited with our very important right holders, the First Nations communities, both in Thunder Bay and at our mine site. I mean, that's fantastic. And so that's some of the objectives that we're after today. But Avalon is very well suited to capitalize on this very emerging opportunity. And I thank you for your time today.
Great job, Zeeshan. Okay, let's jump into some questions for you. So in your new role as president, what can you tell us about your background that will help you take Avalon to new heights? It's pretty clear you have the energy and vision for this role already.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. That's very kind to say. I think part of what's happening now and part of my background, I mean, I'm well versed in different parts of the energy space. I've been an energy regulator in the upstream oil and gas space. I've been a negotiator for the UN FCCC climate change discussions that are becoming a preeminent sort of top-down macro framework that countries are now looking at. So I understand the grinds. I understand where some of our colleagues in government really find themselves thinking about how they should take that next step and how they should help inspire the build of that supply chain. So we've got a tremendous asset base. Separation Rapids is a fantastic asset. As I mentioned, we've got some new news to come, but I think really helping establish that line of communication with the capital markets, our investors, our shareholders, making sure they understand there's a very methodic plan in place. I think that's where some of my strengths and skills will come to bear.
Now, you talked about the government's very active role. So what's your perception of the government's vision in establishing supply chains in Canada? It seems there's a tremendous amount of activity up there.
Yeah, that's a good question. I've got to give kudos, actually, a lot of credit to our federal government and provincial government led by Premier Ford, Minister Fedeli, former Minister Rickford, and now Minister Perry. They rightfully understood that focusing on demand pull, the downstream sector was the preeminent focus, the rightful focus. And so today, I mentioned Volkswagen, Ford, LG, some very grand aspirations to build. I mean, these are multi-billion-dollar projects that are estimated for Ontario. So for the medium, long-term economic viability of this province and this country, I take my hat off to their leadership, understanding we need to focus on the demand pull, making sure the value add is here in Canada and here in North America. And then we rightfully move up the supply chain. We move to the midstream. And, the theories of economics will then demonstrate that the upstream supply, the free hand will dictate that. There'll be a natural supply chain for us to follow. So the Canadian government, the federal government, Minister Champagne, I've got to take my hat off to him. He's had some tremendous leadership, a fantastic salesman for Canada. And we hear that, those aren't my words. We hear that from the folks we talk to in Europe and in South Korea.
Good to hear. So it also sounds that from this year's objectives, there's a very coherent and robust plan in place. So elaborate a little bit more on your growth strategy.
Yeah, so I mentioned we've got a drill program underway at Separation Rapids, a very positive signals coming there. The 2016, 2018 drill programs we did, the PEA we did, in the range of 10 million tons of lithium. For that commodity cycle, very attractive. Did not support sort of more capital to be put in, but certainly now we need to freshen that up, and we understand that. We've got a very good drill program there. So I think our shareholders will be very happy to see some of the info we have coming out the latter half of this year on really what the potential is for Separation Rapids. We're looking at adjacent properties. We really have a growth mindset to make sure that we have commensurate with our aspirations to build out the midstream capacity. Total volumes are there. There's a lot of lithium in northwestern Ontario, and we have our eyes set on that to make sure we increase our basket of supply, if you will, to make sure that we can expand that midstream capacity if we choose as we move forward.
Wonderful. Also, can you elaborate a bit more on petalite and the spodumene and the role both will play in the EV feedstock mix going forward?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. Spodumene, of course, well understood when it comes to lithium hydroxide and really when it comes to lithium space, but that supply is very tight. Australia has been a huge sort of supply source for the traditional end users. That market is tightening tremendously. That's why our test work that I mentioned as part of our 2023 objectives, I think that is another very powerful news item that's coming out. We know very well, academic research knows very well that petalite is suitable for lithium hydroxide, but I think as a substitute strategy for a lot of the downstream users, they will be very pleased to see the suitability of petalite being, having that conversion capacity to lithium hydroxide. And quite frankly, as we look to establish, ourselves in the marketplace, Avalon will have quite a tremendous, wind in our sails, if you will, when it comes to our petalite suitability. I mentioned glass ceramics, but on the lithium hydroxide battery grade material as well, it's a very powerful offering that we have.
Well, Zeeshan, this has been a fascinating time listening about your project. We have so many questions for you, but we are out of time. So we're going to send these questions to you so you can answer them on your own. But please, we'd love for you to come back and give us some updates about this exciting adventure. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much, Anna. Have a great day.
Okay. Stay with us, everyone. We'll be right back with our next presenter.